All right, welcome everybody. There's some familiar faces. Some people are really curious and making the best out of this Texylvania. So excellent. Levi, so you were given I don't know, a limited number of time, and you have your whole life and a massive amount of data behind you. So I would always say, what was the missing question? What was something that that you would expected, a subject that you were expecting, or a subject that you would still like to give to the room?
Who invited you? Who invited you to this Q&A session? Oh wait, you're in charge of this whole thing. Just kidding. Most of the questions I felt like were pretty questions I normally get asked. Maybe not the one about kind of what made me who I was before I became a founder. Yeah, I like the question about failure. I don't know if you guys were in there, but I think entrepreneurs need to talk a lot more about failure. Yeah. There's so much that can be learned from failure. And so it felt like questions were great, and time flew by in a flash, so I was like, oh crap, we're going over time already. But yeah, I don't think there's no questions off the table for me. I'm pretty comfortable being fully vulnerable and authentic. So we'll see what you guys have, because all that matters to me is people have a question, get to ask one.
Anybody has a burning question? Yeah.
Hello. So very inspirational stories. I think it's the first story I heard about failure, not about success. So I had the question. You previously said some stories about how you had like couple of I don't know, 1,000 or 2,000 euros, and then you jumped directly to a couple of 100,000 euros. There is a big gap in terms of money. How did you manage to get there? From where were the first money did you made? I don't know how to formulate the question, if it does make sense.
So you're asking about revenues from customers, not raising money, right?
Yeah, so I'm more curious about the jump you had from the very, very small, the first business you had, a very, very small business, to good and sustainable business.
Yeah, it really depends on what business we're talking about. But like the very first one that I talked about when I was fixing electric signs, it was obvious to me I was going to need to move upstream if I was going to make more and more money. And so, but I had to climb my way in. So it started with servicing, then I got into installation, and then from there I was able to get into manufacturing. And those were big leaps. Going from servicing to installation was like going from 100 or top line like $500,000 in revenues to like double that. But to go way above that, I needed to get into manufacturing. Now in tech, it's different. At NAV, at my company where we have a financial health platform, it depends on the type of revenues within the business model, but some are kind of just incremental growth over time, like the subscription revenues. They compound a little bit because, of course, they're subscription. But then as we had a much larger audience at NAV, American Express, and a lot of these big banks, insurers, they wanted access to our customers. And so that's where the big leaps in revenue came. So when we finally nailed a contract with Capital One, we already had the users, we already had the engagement, but they did not see Capital One cards in the recommendation set that we were offering. So the second it was there, and they have a subprime card, the other FIs we were working with didn't. So the second, like month one, because we had the engagement, the users, now all of a sudden there's offers all over the place to, at the time it was probably tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of users, so there was a pop in revenues. And so that was something we tried to replicate over and over and over, first in different financing products, but then getting into insurance, bank account recommendations, payments recommendations, payroll service recommendations, and so that's then a playbook we were able to repeat. And so every time we enter a new category, there's usually a big pop, and you refine that, and the pops are smaller within that category. But it really depends on the type of business you're in. But getting to that first dollar makes it a hell of a lot easier to get to the second dollar. Getting to the first 1,000 makes it way easier to get to the first 100,000. Like, every dollar is not equal in attainment. It gets easier and easier with time to move the needle at bigger leaps and bigger jumps. Yep.
You've set up, I got the impression at least, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you had set up quite different types of businesses. And I've always been told by investors that you should sort of keep it your specialty, right? So now, if you jump from industry to industry, it's kind of sort of suspicious, kind of red flags. How do you think about that?
I would agree, generally speaking, in tech and small business. Like my path in small business, first one I told you, servicing manufacturing company. I bought a hotel, very different than manufacturing. I owned a financial services business for people that speak Spanish with retail locations where they get insurance, bookkeeping, debit cards, mortgages, tax prep all under one roof. That model didn't exist in the US at the time. Sold that one, and then I owned a string of franchises in the restaurant servicing industry. No, I didn't own restaurants. And then an outsourced sales and marketing company before I got into tech. So it was all very different verticals, not normal. In my case, it gave me the credibility I needed to raise venture capital with a small business focused product. So I would say Lendio, yes, it was a different business, but that experience gave me so much knowledge that I could apply. And then, of course, Lendio gave me so much knowledge I could apply at Nav. And the only company I started that failed, so this dovetails into your comment, was a mobile web browser called Cake. We got 3 patents on our technology, raised $10 million, had millions of people all over the world use it. Highest rated mobile web browser ever on iOS, and tied with Android or beat Android in most countries in the world, went to 0. It was a wind down. And so, that was B2C. And so learned a little bit of a lesson there, stay in my lane, I guess. But yeah, it's the small business, it's not normal. My career is not normal. But it all kind of just happened, and that's why I joked, but it was real about unpacking the story with my own therapist to figure out how did I get to where I'm at and how should that inform where I go moving forward.
Okay, that's at least encouraging.
Yeah.
I'm curious, how did you remain sane after all of these experiences? Any work-life harmony, work-life balance? I'm wondering also about this aside.
Yeah, that's a great question too. So towards the end of 2018, I started to have panic attacks that were debilitating, like horrible panic attacks. And I'd never had depression, I'd never had anxiety, at least that I labeled as anxiety. So I considered myself to have my mind a steel trap, and like nothing could get me. And at the time, Nav was successful. We had $65 million in the bank. I was only ever in good standing as the CEO. So I'm like, where the hell is this coming from? So like you said, going crazy. I felt like I was going crazy. And so that, started work with a psychologist, with a therapist, and started to do a lot of things better to take care of my mind. So to kind of answer your question, I think I didn't do the things that I needed to do so I wouldn't eventually go crazy. But the panic attacks got me ahead of the craziness to sort out what was going on in my head and introduce new habits and new methods of control that. And good news is I've been anxiety-free in entirety for a little over 2 years now, and I haven't had a panic attack since early 2020. So it's like hope for you out there that have mental health challenges. But I never saw that coming in my life. I could deal with anything. I was steady as a rock. I was the one guy you could call, the one person you could count on no matter what happened. Always calm in the face of absolute misery. That's when my mind was the clearest. Higher the stakes, the higher the misery, the most at risk, just my mind clear and crisp as could be. And then of course, towards the end of 2018, that all started to change, and now I'm in a good spot now, like I said. But so I'm not maybe the best guy to ask, because I didn't take care of myself along the way like I should have. But I think having a purpose, like a reason why, like for some people it's God. I'm not religious, so that's not for me. But like have an impact. My family was always high, and still is high up there. Those caring about more than money, or like I said, the would-be celebrity, gives you something that gives you energy when you don't have it. And so, hopefully that is the decent answer on some level.
So you spoke a bit about how your roadmap maybe wasn't the usual one, and you ventured in a lot of types of companies. Looking back now, what's some tips that you would suggest to small companies to avoid going through maybe the bad pathing you took, or that you see now as bad maybe? But
Yeah, you bet. So it's important to understand when to trust your gut and when not to. And mistakes I made along the way is when I trusted my gut when I had no business trusting my gut. And when I look at the times I trusted my gut and it worked, I had a legitimate claim to the gut feeling being reasonable at the time based on my life experience or education up to that point. And so, one is like, don't always trust your gut. 2 is you got to believe in the unbelievable, and you got to have a confidence level that's irrational. And what I mean by that is, if you're looking to start a business, whether it's a small business or a tech company, If you go to your parents and you have like normal parents, they're going to go, hell yeah, you're a genius for sure. Here's 25 grand. If you ask your best friends, they're like, are you kidding? For sure. And then behind your back, like, he's kind of a dumbass, but I don't want to discourage him. So you're going to go to people you know, and they're going to say, do it, because of course, you're the one. You got to talk to people that don't know you, don't like you, whatever, to get a little more objective feedback. But at the end of the day, you have to have an irrational belief in success. And by irrational, I mean you believe you're the one out of X that's going to make it. And I had that, but I built up to it. I didn't have that when I started my first company. I didn't have when my second company was successful, but it started to click. I was like, maybe this is all just luck. Like, maybe I'm not worth my salt in business. But then the more successes I had, the more I realized, like, this is repeatable. Like, believe it or not, like, manufacturing has a lot in common with tech. Like, at the end of the day, leadership's similar. What you do in an HR situation is similar. You cut payroll the same way. Like, so many things are the same. It's building blocks in business no matter where you're at. But believing for some reason, and hopefully you have a good case in your head, that you're the exception to the rule. And I earned that along the way. By the time I got into tech, I believed, and I knew it was irrational to other people, but I believed I was the difference. And I could articulate a really good reason as to why I was going to be the 1 in 1,000. Like in the venture-backed space, I think it's something like 1 out of 1,000 companies that raise a seed round are going to become a $1 billion company. I believed 100% then, and no matter the misery I went through along the way, I believed I was that 1 in 1,000. But I earned my way into it. Some people are born with it. But going into it knowing that, and knowing you're going to go to hell and back. If you build a $1 billion company, you'll go to hell and back 100 times. Guaranteed. It's not smooth sailing for anybody, no matter how they tell their story. And so knowing, like, am I willing to go to hell and back 100 times? I don't know when it's going to come, and I don't know what it's going to look like, but it is coming and it's guaranteed. You kind of have to have that fortitude inside of you, or don't do it. Now, if you're building a small business, same thing applies, but maybe you're going to go to hell and back 10 times or 20 times instead of 100 plus times. But you're still going to go to hell and back, no matter what company you try to build.
Very encouraging.
I can also add to this story. So, like my parents, they were thinking like, okay, you are building your own limited company. You will not make money. How can you raise some funds? Why you are not working like a normal person? Why you are not following the same path? Why? Because we did the money as we could because of the communism and so on. So we have in roots some of kind of psychological problems and so on, and are in roots by the parents and so on. So I can add to this. In Romania, instead of the parents telling you, okay, you have 25K over here and start your own business, move forward, they will say, okay, no, stop, it's not working. And your friends will tell you, oh my God, you built your own company and you are working as a freelancer. What the heck are you doing? You will not make money. Look over there, it's inflation. 2 of the clients are refusing you. I mean, look my side. 3 months I had no clients over here, and I had to go across and move forward and so on. So yeah, this was just adding to the topic itself. But I have a question in relates of the growing and having this like moving forward mind kind of feeling. What do you think about mentoring? Because you mentioned mentors down there. How do you pick your mentors and what are your key points? Because I feel like once you are in a proper environment that brings you up, that will grow you like exponentially throughout the career and also throughout business and so on. So what do you think about this side?
Yeah, so first of all, you got to find, I wouldn't trust a mentor or advisor that doesn't have in life what you want. When I was selling my first company, by all intents and purposes on where I'm from, I'd made it. Like, people couldn't imagine more success than what I had where I'm from. So my father-in-law, when he heard I was selling my company, so he also owns a farm in Idaho and is, doesn't have a lot of money. But I didn't want to be a farmer. And so my ripe age of 24 or something, he gives me this advice of like, this is crazy. Don't sell this and do something else. And I didn't have any tact at the time, but I was like, I'm not going to take your advice because you don't have what I want. And I could have been like, I was very not kind in how I said it, which I regret, and we actually laughed about it recently when he was in town, but you got to find mentors and advisors that have what you want, number one. Number two, ideally an advisor or mentor, they don't need any money. Like they may have a stake, like you may give them some equity or something like that, but if they need a paycheck from you, they're probably not qualified to be a mentor or an advisor to you, depending on where you're at and what kind of company you start. And then the third is you'll outgrow certain mentors and advisors, and you got to be willing to move on and find somebody. Your perspective in life elevates, and what you accomplish is different. You know, you'll outgrow different folks. Like when I started out my professional career, I was fixing electric signs. I was cold calling, saying I charge $45 an hour. Competition charges 90, and I didn't see myself ever growing this business outside of my local area, and so I had someone back then that I thought was a mentor, and he was a smart person, but he's a financial planner that does really well in rural Idaho. Like, that's not what I wanted, and so it was not too long before I outgrew his advice, and I needed to move on and find somebody that was better positioned to help me get to the next level, as I wanted more or wanted something different, both personally and professionally.
So you set up goals throughout, choosing the mentors and so on, and you have kind of a roadmap in your mind, no, to move forward.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Hey, how the hell do you do all that with 6 kids?
It's a good question. Well, my kids would have to give you the real answer, but I also think I've been a great dad. And so my dad, because the farm didn't produce enough money, he worked at a dairy, the swing shift, my whole life. So when I was at home, I felt like I was his employee, or when he was home, I felt like I was his employee. And I didn't want to, and he wasn't there most of the time. He wasn't able to make it to any sports or any of the things that parents usually can make it to, but he was doing what he had to do to pay the bills. So I don't begrudge him for that. But I knew I wanted something different for my kids. So despite all the things that I've said, and despite the fact they're true, I was home almost every day by 6 or 6:30, and I was present. I was not on my phone, and I spent time with my kids. And when they went to bed, I spent time with my wife, and then I would work oftentimes most of the night. So I believe it's possible, and I don't believe in work-life balance. I believe in work-life integration. Like the two have to live together and breathe together. But my kids still love me, knock on wood. My oldest is 21, my twins are 12, and I have a great marriage. And so Silicon Valley in particular will tell you got to sacrifice everything. You got to work 24 hours a day. There's diminishing returns in how many hours you put in a day. Like, there's science around this now. Plus, if you don't take a break at some point and you want to work more hours, like I said, there's diminishing returns, but maybe you'll make some bad decisions. And so I knew, luckily somehow when I was young, that it didn't matter how much commercial success I had in life. If I failed as a human being and as a father and as a husband, it wasn't going to be worth it. I would rather not make a ton of money and just have enough to get by. And so it wasn't easy, but that's how. I made sure I was present. I worked very little on weekends unless they were asleep. When I travel for work, I jam as much in as possible. So if I got to work in New York, I get 5 days of work into 3 days, so I'm gone less time.
Cool.
Mr. Levi, you've been answering questions for the past hours, so I just wanted to take this opportunity to let you say maybe something you've had in mind. I don't have a specific question, maybe something came to your mind when you were talking on the stage or right here, so I'm just going to leave it at that. If you have any thoughts to share with us, whatever.
Sure. I don't know what any of you do or what you aspire to, but I'm a big believer in, like, and you probably could sense this from me making fun of the would-be celebrity of being a venture-backed CEO. Like, I'm just another person. I chose a path. My path is not more or less noble than any other path that people take. And so, what I'd encourage everyone, and when I was CEO of my company still, whenever I would, and at every all hands, I would find an excuse to talk about customer service, that when great things are accomplished, it's actually not because something great happened. It's because there was a huge accumulation of really small things that in isolation or inconsequential, may be irrelevant. But when looked at it as a body of whole, moving in the same direction, that's when great things happen. And so I would always make sure to mention customer service, because that's the role that's probably looked down on the most in tech. But I feel like a person that works in customer service that wants to be at the best in their craft, that is no different, better or worse than a CEO that wants to be the best in their craft. So whatever it is, wherever you choose to show up in this world, I want to just encourage you to show up as good as possible. Like, aspire to be the best at what you do, and do it for yourself and the people around you. Don't do it for any other motive. Like, I'm my biggest competitor, because I'm not going to look at anyone else and say like, oh, I'm going to benchmark myself against these CEOs. No, fuck that. I know what's inside of me. I know what I'm capable of. Maybe that person was capable more than me, maybe less, doesn't matter. But I know if I'm showing up and I'm giving it my all every single day. So all paths are noble. And whatever you guys are thinking about or working on, like, don't compare yourself to me. Compare yourself to yourself. You know what you're capable of. And if you doubt it, put a lot of good shit in your head so you can start to believe more in yourself. But that's kind of like, there's this CEOs get glorified for some reason, and it's just silly. Like I said, I just have a path. It was my path. You're all going to pick your path, and that path can change from here and there at different times throughout your life. They're all noble. Like the person, whoever picked me up at the airport, is a nice guy, I forgot his name. That's his path. Like, he's driving a car, awesome. He's driving a Mercedes, could have been a shitty car, but he was super nice. He was on time. Like, I don't see myself as better or worse than that person. I loved how he showed up, and I loved that I didn't have to get a taxi. So I guess it's kind of random, but whatever you're working on, good luck. I'm rooting for you.
I really love that advice. I also gave that to my kids. It's like, when my son did athletics, and it was also, compare your score last time. Try to be 1% better, and that's it. Who cares about the others? Just be a little bit better every now and then, and you're going to be fine. Yeah, cool. Any inspired questions from here, or? Then I thank you very much.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Very cool. Very inspiring. Thank you. Okay.